Something else, isn't it? Amazing. Can I have the Bhagavatam? Thanks for writing it up. Hare, Prabhu, how are you going? Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivanadhari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivanadhari Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivanadhari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivanadhari Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Parivajika-acharya Stotarasa at the Śrīmad Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Śrīla Prabhupada ki Nanda Koti Vaishnava Vrinda ki Yantara Śrīmad Bhāgavatam ki Itago Premanandi. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Shri Shri Guru and Gauranga. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So we're reading from the Śrīmad Bhāgavatam, Canto 4, Chapter 30, Text 47, the activities of the Prachetas. So the Sanskrit is Tatra vasitaye vriksha Bita buhitaram tada Ujruste prachetobhya Upadista svayambhuva Tatra vishitaye vriksha Bita duhitaram tada Ujruste prachetobhya Upadista svayambhuvo Tatava vrikshasya vriksha Vita tuhiritaram tada Ujasruste tsuvatetobhya Utadista svayambhuva Tatra visistaye vriksha Duitaranam tada Uruchete prachetobhya Upadista svayambhuvo Tatra there Avishita remaining Ye which Vrikshaha trees Vita being afraid Duhitaram their daughter Tada at that time Ujbuhur delivered Te they Prachetobhya unto the Prachetas Upadishta being advised Swayambhuvo by Lord Brahma. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada. The remaining trees, being very much afraid of the Prachetas, immediately delivered their daughter at the advice of Lord Brahma. Purport. The daughters of the tree is referred to in text 13 of this chapter. This daughter was born of Kandu and Pramloka. The society girl Pramloka, after giving birth to the child, immediately left for the heavenly kingdom. While the child was crying, the king of the moon took compassion upon her and saved her by putting his finger into her mouth. This child was cared for by the trees, and when she grew up, by the order of Lord Brahma, she was delivered to the Prachetas as their wife. The name of the girl was Marisha, and the next verse will explain. It was the predominating deity of the trees that delivered the daughter. In this connection, Srila Jiva Goswami Prabhupada states, Rikshastad adistar tadevata. The trees means the controlling deity of those trees. In the Vedic literature, we find that there is a controlling deity of the water. Similarly, there is a controlling deities of the trees. The Prachetas were engaged in burning all the trees to ashes, and they considered the trees their enemy. To pacify the Prachetas, the predominating deity of the trees, under the advice of Lord Brahma, delivered the daughter Marisha. Amagana Timiranda Syagananjana Shalakaya Chakshuram Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhuvaivacha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Śrīmad Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namine. Namaste Saraswati Devam Gauravani Pacharane Nevisesha Shunyavadi Paschachade Chitaride. Again, we've got an amazing section of the Śrīmad Bhāgavatam here about trees. In our suburban life, we actually neglect trees. We just think they're part of the scenery and there's nothing really, there's just a tree there growing up, but actually trees are more than that. And when we were contemplating and just thinking about this verse and the previous verses that the devotees have been given and how the Prachetas were burning the forests, it brought back an experience that I had some time ago when we were able to distribute meals for people in need during the bushfires. One of the things that we were able to do was we had permission to go right in the heart of where the bushfire had been. And we had all the prasadam was there ready for the residents of King Lake. But while we were driving through the forest fire area, the area that had been burnt by bushfires, there was an incredible sadness that came over each and every one of us when we saw the burnt bushes. So here we see the Prachetas are killing the trees. And we may not think that that's all that, you're just burning a couple of trees. But when we drove through there, none of the devotees had a dry eye. We were all crying because we saw the devastation and the pain that this fire had brought about. So far, and this, collectively, the trees were dying. It was like so tragic, it was really, and then obviously also the forest animals that were living there. So this was really interesting. So in the same token, when we're thinking about forests, they can be incredibly beautiful places, Actually, it's recommended in the Shastras that for a sage, and for all of us actually, to go to the forest at some stage and just contemplate, get away from city life. Forests are an amazing thing. If you've ever wandered through the forest, you actually feel that peace overcome you. There's a tranquility about forests, and you can walk through a forest, you smell the beautiful aromas of the different plants and the trees and everything. It's very uplifting and it's very peaceful, and it's not contaminated by a lot of negative vibration. It seems to be the trees repel that materialistic excitement and turmoil. So it's really a wonderful thing to actually have that opportunity every now and again to go to the forest. Like if we go to Hare Krishna Valley, we're right next door to a national forest. And Keshava Prabhu takes some of the retreat people through a walk through the forest. Absolutely amazing, so fulfilling. Yet a forest can also be a very frightening place. If a person is lost in a forest, the trees are actually quite daunting because they all look the same. And it seems like the trees are capturing the person in the forest. When you speak to people that have been lost in the bush, they feel that the trees are their enemy, that they're actually stopping them from, again, finding their path, because everything looks so much the same. So it's an interesting thing in material creation to actually contemplate what are trees and forests. So trees are significant. Actually, we're talking about here, and Prabhupada is mentioning how there's a controlling deity of trees. So this is synonymous with a lot of cultures within the world today. A lot of significant religious traditions have spiritual teachings where trees have great sacred meaning. And tree deities, or tree spirits, or nature spirits, are related to trees in many cultures. Often they're represented as women, or varying from fairies, elves, that kind of thing. Now, generally speaking, we think this is all mythology. If you were talking to someone and you say, well, perhaps there are things like ethereal entities within forests and that, which here is explained there is. Most people would say, oh, that's nonsense. It's something that we teach our children, Hans Christian Andersen, fairies and all that. But in fact, as is pointed out in the Śrīmad Bhāgavatam, it's a fact. So in some of the cultures, even in Indian culture, yakshis or yakshinis are examples of mystical maidens, deities, of Hindu and Buddhist and Jain mythology as well, that are closely associated with trees. Apparently the banyan tree is one, the ashok tree, and there's another one called the sal tree. I've never heard of the sal tree. And then even within our scriptures, we have the wonderful appearance of Srimati Tulsi Devi, who manifests herself in the form of a tree, in the form of a bush, to help us in our Krishna consciousness. These are amazing things. In Krishna consciousness, there are so many amazing things. So even tree deities and this aspect of understanding the qualities of trees is there in Northern European folklore as well. In fact, the Christians, even up to the stage of 1200 AD, were condemning people who were worshipping trees. So you had the village people that would worship certain trees. Which brings us to the other point of the first people of our nation and the Indigenous people of the land, who had a greater understanding, in a sense, than the gross materialist of today, who puts everything like that on the back burner and says it doesn't exist. Whereas in those indigenous cultures, always understood that trees are to be, were considered community members of their tribe or their mob. They were not entities that existed in some biological separateness. They were actually part of the whole grouping. And we had some opportunity to have some association because it's coming up to NAIDOC Week, which is recognising the Indigenous community of Australia. And I've had some opportunity to talk to some of the Indigenous community. Fascinating to hear some of their spirituality. And this is a quote from one of the Indigenous elders. Trees are a part of our mob, part of our human world, and active members of our communities with lives, loves, and feelings. So they actually understand the tree has a life, it has feelings, and it has love. And sometimes when you relate that to a person, they think, what are you talking about? A tree has love. There are scientific experiments that are being done on a regular basis and more intensely, where they monitor a tree or a plant for emotion. And that's actually a fact. They can register there is actually feelings that a plant has. If a plant is put under duress, it won't grow properly. If a plant is played heavy metal music, it won't grow properly because it feels, oh, this is negative. If a plant is hearing kirtan or positive music, they grow and they flourish. I know for a fact that we, in our house, we've got a new house and we're sort of building plants and growing trees. If you talk to the plants, if you nurture the plants, they grow. They do wonderfully well. There's one palm tree, and he's my friend. And every morning I have to switch the light on, but every morning I touch him and say, good morning, how are you? And you can feel a response. If you're a sensitive person, you can actually feel that response from a plant. So the Indigenous people are saying it has lives, it loves, and it has feelings. They go on to say, and this was really interesting because at one stage, through Interfaith, we were given a tour by the local Indigenous population of Port Phillip. And there is a tree near the St Kilda Junction, which is called the corroboree tree. And this tree is over 500 years old, right? It's a beautiful, have you seen it, Prabhu? It's this beautiful gum tree, huge, massive base. And that was the corroboree tree. So the tree was a witness to all the activities that the tribes would do for that area. The decisions they made, the direction they would take, and the conflicts they had would be resolved at this corroboree point. And the tree was the central point of that. So there was so much energy and so much input. So we went there, and the person that was leading the tour, she was pointing out how you can feel the energy of this tree. And when you touch it, you touch this tree. If you're a sensitive person, you can feel the power and the energy and what this tree has witnessed. And she said, this tree has seen so much change. This used to be the area by which the Yarra River used to run past it in Port Phillip. And they detoured the river away, and then they built houses and everything, and the freeway and all this, and this tree has witnessed everything. So thereby, for the Indigenous community, when you see that some big multinational company wants to destroy a certain section of land, to kill the trees in that particular area of land where they've had meetings and so on and so forth, it's like killing their children, killing a member of their community, of their family. There's another thing, when we were building one of the first, what were we doing? Dan and myself, Dhanvantari and myself, a devotee, back in the 70s, were commissioned to start making models for the Moomba parade. And we wanted to find out a local sculptor who could actually give us some direction as to how to do things. And there was one sculptor that we knew of who lived in the Sherbrooke forest up in the Dandenongs. And his name was William Ricketts. He was an 80-year-old man, and he was anybody been to William Ricketts Sanctuary? Amazing. Again, it's a forest, just a forest. And this sculptor, who was very much in touch with the Indigenous community, he started to represent the different facets of our Indigenous culture here in Australia and Victoria in particular by carving into the trees. By carving into the trees and also forming sculptures around the trees. So you walk through this forest and you see these incredible lifelike sculptures of the culture of the Aboriginal community within Victoria. Absolutely amazing. Again, respecting that the living entities in the trees are worth taking note of and being very sacred. So she goes on to continue. This is my Indigenous elder. In Indigenous philosophies, all elements of the natural world are emanated. Every rock, mountain, river, plant, and animal are all sentient, having individual personalities and a life force. Trees are also a one-stop shop. She said the trees are a one-stop shop for us, for the Indigenous community, for all our needs. So this was like their 7-Eleven, a shop, They sustain us with their generosity. The tree is so generous. The hard bark creates our houses. The soft paper wraps our babies. The stringy bark twists in the water carriers and carved into knots. Leaves and fruits are our food and medicine, and the roots and branches become tools that make life easy. So this is their one-stop shop. This is amazing. So in our culture also we understand how Lord Chaitanya in the Shikshashtaka actually makes an analogy between a tree. A tree is more tolerant. We have to be more tolerant than the tree. The tree stands there in the shade and gives us shade from the harsh sun, and so on. So that was what was coming to me when I was reading and when I've been hearing the classes that have been given about trees. So here we understand that to pacify the Prachetas, the predominating deity of the tree, under the advice of Lord Brahma, delivered the door to Marisha. So it is advised here that we go back to the 13th verse of this chapter and just have a look at this daughter Marisha, and why that happened. So in that section, the translation of that verse in this chapter, text 13, is, O son of King Prachindvarishat, the heavenly society girl named Pramloka kept the lotus-eyed daughter of Kandu in the care of the forest trees. Then she went back to the heavenly planet. This daughter was born by the coupling of the Apsara named Pramloka and the sage Kandu. So remember, just a few weeks ago we were talking about Kandu. So the purport of His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada was, whenever a great sage undergoes severe austerities for material power, the king of heaven, Indra, becomes very envious. So this is the old Indra. Indra's got a real problem sometimes, you know. All the demigods have responsible posts for management of universal affairs and are very highly qualified in pious activities. Similarly, there are the demigods and you have sub-demigods, lower entities that also do the controlling. Although they are ordinary living entities, they are able to attain posts like Lord Brahma, Indra, Chandra and Varuna. It may be at one stage we perhaps had a position like that, or in the future the Lord may ask us to take a position like that as devotees of Krishna. As is the nature of the material world, the king of heaven, Indra, is very anxious if a great sage undergoes severe austerities. When he sees that the devotees are making a bit of advancement, he really gets upset. The whole material world is filled with such envy that everyone becomes afraid of his neighbours. Have a look at it today, as far as envy is concerned. Every businessman is afraid of his associates because this material world is a field of activities for all kinds of envious people. People who have come here to compete with the opulence of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Thus, Indra was very much afraid of the severe austerities performed by the great sage Kandu. And he sent Pramlocha to break his vow and austerities. A similar incident also took place with Vishwamitra. It's again that whole thing. And the way to get the sage, the ultimate snare, is just bring on the dancing girls. You know, that always allows people. So, not from the purport. Also, we can also know the story of Haridas Thakur. We're all familiar with Haridas Thakur. He was a young devotee of the Lord, and he was similarly allured by the incarnation of Maya Devi. Prior to that, he was also tempted by, or supposedly tempted by, that young girl, the prostitute Chintamani, and then later by the incarnation of Maya herself. But Haridas Thakur easily passed the test because of his unalloyed devotion to Krishna. He was just fixed at the lotus feet of Krishna. A sincere devotee of the Lord shuns all material sense enjoyment due to his higher taste for spiritual enjoyment. Spiritual enjoyment is it in association with the Lord. It is important that we strive for this spiritual enjoyment because that is actually the success in our spiritual life. And that's in Bhagavad Gita 2.6 it's stated, while contemplating the objects of the senses, a person develops attachment for them, and from such attachment lust develops, and from lust anger arises. So envy or lust is our enemy, and it's spurred on by the mind. Now, I wanted to talk a little bit about controlling the mind. If we're trying to achieve this spiritual enjoyment, one of the things that are very much important is that we somehow or other control our mind. Mind can be, as we know from the scriptures, our mind can be our best friend, but it can also be our worst enemy. And as we're seeing here, even a great demigod like Lord Indra is still affected by the mind because he feels this envy. The mind is that agent that's saying, you've got something I want. And the mind is never satisfied. So the reason why we're in this material world at the present stage is because of this selfishness, this I want. We want something, as is pointed out by the Lord, that we want something that the Lord has. One who is not Krishna conscious is subjected to the material desires while contemplating the objects of the senses. The senses require real engagement. Our senses need engagement. And so instead of being engaged in material things, we should engage the senses in transcendental loving service to the Lord. And they certainly seek engagement, and if they don't have that, they certainly will seek engagement in material activities. This is what I was contemplating. In the material world, everyone, including Lord Shiva and Lord Brahma, to say nothing of the other demigods or lower spirits or humanity, is subject to the influence of the sense objects. And the only method to get out of this puzzle of material existence is to become Krishna conscious. So if it is difficult for the demigods to control themselves, if it is difficult for a person like Indra to control himself and control this envy, it's not going to be easy for us as well. So we have to understand that, first of all, it is not easy. And Lord Chaitanya actually asked this of Haridas Thakur. Lord Chaitanya once inquired from Haridas, who was known as Brahma Haridas, so he was an incarnation of Lord Brahma, how the Yavanas, or persons bereft of Vedic culture, who had no knowledge of Vedic culture, would be delivered in this Kali Yuga. Lord Chaitanya was asking this of Haridas. And Haridas Thakur replied that their deliverance would be possible if they very loudly chant the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. For hearing the Hare Krishna mantra chanted loudly, even by little realization, that would help them. So this is the key. In our age, we are so fortunate when you understand that even the demigods have difficulty. Here in this Kali Yuga, we've been given the great opportunity of ridding ourselves of this envy, ridding ourselves of this selfishness by that clear chanting of the holy name. In order to chant in such a way, we have to wage a battle against the mind. It is literally a battle against the mind. No matter how long you've been a devotee, no matter how many years you've been here, no matter what ashram you're in, no matter where you're situated, what position you are in Krishna consciousness, your battle with the mind is an ongoing battle. And that's why Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj was saying, in the morning you beat the mind with your slippers, and in the evening you beat your mind with the shoes. So it's certainly interesting to note how much the mind can actually control us. Be on guard on all times. We have to be on guard at all times. See the mind, actually, this is something that Tamal Krishna Maharaj was explaining at one stage. We have to see the mind, in a sense, as a separate entity. That is something, an influence, a separate entity, and that we have to deal with. And, we can wake up in the morning and, the first thing the mind will say, especially on these very cold mornings, the first thing the mind will say is, just stay in here for another half an hour, it's nice and warm. And there's subtle sort of things, but what it's doing is it's taking you away from your sadhana. So that's where it requires us to be strong and say, no, I've got to get up, I've got to chant. So Lord Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita that the mind can be controlled by constant practice and detachment. So you detach yourself from the mind. You basically say to your mind, shut up. When it comes up with this great idea, actually you should sleep in a little bit more, Bhakta, you need that extra rest, it's pretty cold out there. You turn around and you say to your mind, shut up. I don't want to listen to you. I've got my sadhana to do. If we do that, then actually we practice detachment and separateness and stay on the path. We have to stay on the path. Krishna says that whenever and wherever the mind wanders due to its flickering and unsteady nature, we must bring it back under the control of the self. So bring it back to the self. This spiritual life, this path that we've all chosen to go on, to go back home, back to Godhead, this spiritual life is like, it's been said so many times, it's like a razor's edge. Just like a razor's edge. And we deviate a little bit and whoa! And we've seen that with devotees. They take a little bit of a deviate turn and unfortunately they leave the association of devotees. So we should stay very, very fixed and very, very in control. So the mind, Prabhupada continue on, The mind is like a child. If you're married, you understand that children are pretty frivolous sort of individuals, you know. They are attracted to everything. Everything is like, oh, that's good. Oh, let's go. There it goes. So it wants everything, even things that are not good for it. You know, you give it a child a packet of lollies, it'll eat the whole lot. And so you have to control the child. And you, as a parent, you sometimes have to discipline the child. No, you can't have any more. Oh, but I want some more, Daddy. You know, no, you're not getting any more. Similarly, our mind is like an uncontrolled child, and we have to discipline the mind with our intelligence and with our spiritual understanding, our spiritual being. We must control the mind. We actually have to tell it to shut up. So the mind is attracted to so many material things everywhere we look. From the moment we wake up, someone is telling us that this is the thing you need for the material world. You need this thing, you need that thing, you need a new car, you need a new house, you need this. You know, I should get a new such and such, and new. It's always something. And there are, in this today's society, the mind is helped along by the constant bombardment of advertising. Everywhere you look in society today, you are bombarded by making you feel inadequate if you don't have the latest razor blade, if you don't have the latest beanie, if you don't have the latest watch. And they're advertising to you, and they're advertising to your mind all the time. And your mind will say, actually, that watch would look really good on you, Bhakta. You know, I mean, if you had that, that'd be great. If you had this, you'll be great. And then to entice a little bit further, the advertising companies are so expert that they say, let's link this advertising with the base desire of an individual. Let's just add a little bit of sexuality to it. You know, there's an advertisement on the TV for power tools. You know, power tools. I mean, you know, saws and hammers and everything. And they've got a girl in a bikini whacking nails in, and it's like, you know, whoa, I've got to get that hammer because the girl with the bikini has got it, you know. So these are just so, the sexualization of advertising, it really affects an individual. So for a devotee, we actually stay away from that. As much as the mind wants to, oh, why don't you just check out what's on the TV? Why don't you just... The mind is constantly there telling us. It's never enough. Never enough. No matter how much we get in the material world, it's still, we're always dissatisfied. A materialist is always dissatisfied. You talk to a materialist, ask them, oh no, if only I could go and travel overseas. People are so frustrated at the moment. Why do you think there is such an increase in depression at the moment? There's such an increase in discontent. Because people are forced to stay in their one place. They can't do anything. Oh, I'm bored, you know. I want to go out. I want to go to the movies. The mind is saying, you can't go to the movies anymore. You know, I want to go to the pub. I can't drink with my friends. And this whole mind has just overtaken them. And because they can't, they feel frustrated. They feel dependent on this. And consequently, they go into a deep state of depression. One of the biggest things in society at the moment is depression. Did you know that? A greater fear of this pandemic is not so much the people that are dying that are in intensive care, but the amount of people that are suffering from depression leading to suicide. When the mind gets to such a stage where they're saying, oh, if I can't have it, I may as well kill myself. And they kill themselves. So there is a greater thing, you know, like even the economic growth of society, you know, the fact that businesses are not working. And if you watch the news sometimes, you know, you see these business operators and they're devastated because everything they've worked hard for is collapsing. And so, you know, there is so much pain and suffering that is going on because of this COVID-19. You know, you saw the towers at the moment in Carlton and everything, and how they're locking up these people. It's like they're absolutely frustrated. For a devotee, for a renunciate, for a person that is in the renounced order of life, and I'm not just talking about sannyasis, I'm talking about grihastas, brahmacharis, it doesn't disturb us. Really, there's hardly any devotee that complains about the lockdown. You know, I mean, if you are solid in your Krishna consciousness And it means you have to be solid in your Krishna consciousness. That means you still rise early. Don't listen to your mind. Oh, nobody's there. I don't have to go to Mangalarti. Nobody knows I'm sleeping in. You know, nobody's taking notes of who's coming to Mangalarti or not. You know, but if you stay fixed, that isolation is actually brilliant. You get so much more time to read, so much more time to hear the Shastra and listen to people and listen to classes and have seminars, Haribol Prabhu, and hear about Krishna's pastimes. It's the only thing that I have to say that is a detriment to this isolation is you don't have that close association with your God brothers and sisters. And it's so nice when you actually get to see. But even that, we can compensate a little bit by having different online meetings. And the other thing that we really miss is kirtan, you know. And it's nice, but to be in association in front of the deities and having kirtan. Like I was driving in this morning and I had this fabulous kirtan. There's this Russian devotee that's got a really beautiful kirtan. And I put it up full bore just before I came and just really absorbed myself in the holy name of the Lord, you know. So, but for a materialist, it's never enough. They always want to have something more. And recently I had an opportunity to read something I haven't read for a while. There are these little red books by Satsvarup Maharaj called Prabhupada Nectar. Has anybody ever read them? You got them? Oh, they're so nectarian. Anyway, I was reading one, and in regards to this whole thing of, you know, being enticed by the mind and sexuality and so on and so forth, Prabhupada explains and tells the story of the Muslim emperor Akbar. You've heard that story many times, but it's always good to hear about that. Akbar had a minister who was expert. He was such a great advisor to the emperor. And the emperor at one stage says he was frustrated also, you know, like, as all of us are sometimes. All of us are. How long does this lusty desire keep on going in me? How long am I going to have to put up with this lusty desire? So he was asking his minister, how long does it take for this lusty desire to go? And the minister said, for a materialist, up to the last point of death. And Akbar said, that's not possible. You know, and he said, well, Maharaj, you come with me. And he said, I know a person that is about to die, an elderly person that's about to die, and you bring your young daughter along. And so he said, okay. So when they came, and the first thing that the old man is dying, and he saw the young girl coming into the room, oh. So that never leaves. So this was the thing that Prabhupada was pointing out, that you know, we have to have that higher taste. So the mind must be disciplined by the practice we learn and pull it away from those things that are not good for us. See the mind as a separate entity. It's a handy thing to have. See it as your friend when it's encouraging to do Krishna conscious things, and see it as your enemy when it's deviating you from your Krishna consciousness. Detachment is helpful because if we understand that real happiness comes not from material things, real happiness doesn't come from material things, but rather from loving relationships with Krishna. Then we become detached from all the pushings of material desires and we can control the mind. The mind is constantly pushing. Therefore, this constant practice of detachment, ultimately we have to develop a higher taste. So how do we develop a higher taste? What is that higher taste? And it's not just prasadam. You know, I mean, that's a wonderful thing. That's a great higher taste. But it's not the only thing. Lord Krishna says the embodied soul may be restricted from sense enjoyment, but the taste for sense objects remain. By ceasing such engaging experience, a higher taste is fixed in consciousness. That's Bhagavad Gita 259. That higher taste is engaging in devotional service. And the easiest, as Haridas Thakur is saying, especially in this age, is the chanting of the Lord's holy name. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Loud chanting. Really becoming enthusiastic about our rounds. The power of the Hare Krishna mantra is incomprehensible by us. We may take it we take it for granted, actually. But the vibratory power of this mantra is so strong, And if we diligently chant the holy name of the Lord actually manifests a loving relationship from within the heart. Just like when I was driving here today and I became engrossed in that chanting, the driving, I could have been anywhere. My body just took over driving the car. But I was just engrossed in a loving exchange between the Lord calling on His holy name, even while I was driving. What to speak of when we chant our rounds? So the mind plays tricks on us at the most important time in our day, and that is when we're chanting our rounds. The mind will put up so many different obstacles stopping us from actually chanting our rounds clearly and exactly. All the great sages, all the great teachers, Srila Prabhupada included, will always say the trick to experiencing a higher taste in chanting is how we actually approach the Maha Mantra. That we listen intensely, that we actually hear the vibratory quality of the holy name. When we do that, we actually experience it. It is a physical experience that all of us can experience. You start to experience a warming of the heart. You feel a presence of Krishna within your heart. And you know that Krishna is there with you. But it has to take that detachment, and you have to have that ability to push everything else aside. So it's incumbent upon us to really make an effort. And at that time, the mind will try to deviate you. Maybe I should look at there's an email that's just come in. Maybe I should just check that out. Maybe I need such and such. Oh, you're uncomfortable in that position. There's always so many things. Now, if you can control the mind, and the best thing is that 16 rounds, it's not possible for everyone, but especially now that a lot of our Grihastha friends and everything are working from home and are able to chant 16 rounds in one lot, that is the very best you could do. And when you chant that rounds in such a way, then you feel elated, you feel uplifted, you feel encouraged to read more about that loving personality which you've just connected with. And so thereby the reading of Srila Prabhupada's books doesn't become a chore, it becomes actually something you seek after, because I want to know more about that personality that I love. I want to connect with that personality more. That's like in the material sense, when a person falls in love with a member of the opposite sex, they want to find out everything about that person. What they eat, what they do, where they go, So in the same way, when we really make an emphasis of chanting our rounds properly, and it's interesting, like I have Prabhupada chanting in the background, and I'm so glad of one part in there where Prabhupada always says, sit properly, Because again, it wakes you up. I should be more attentive, and so often we slouch a little bit and you're spaced out on something completely. Instead of bring it back and come back to the mantra. If you have that, then the taste, the higher taste becomes obvious. Your service becomes really fulfilling. Whatever your service may be, all of us are different. We all have different aspects in our lives. We all do different things in our lives. But the enthusiasm, the utsara, to actually promote Krishna consciousness becomes enlivened in you. For me personally, being trained as a painter, as an artist, some of you may know I'm doing a series of paintings on Bhagavad Gita. I can't wait to get into after I've chanted good rounds, and I really try to chant good rounds, the enthusiasm builds up in you, and now I've got my opportunity to paint, to do what I want to do in my Krishna consciousness. The ideas come flooding in. And it's not my ideas, it's Krishna encouraging, you could do this here, you could do that there, Bhakti, you can paint it like this, you can do it like that. It's just so incredibly nectarian. It's a higher taste, that's all you want to do. Similarly, also one of the things that we miss out on while we're in this COVID-19 pandemic is, yes, of course, we're missing our association, and we're missing kirtan, and we're missing bhajan. When you hear about Lord Chaitanya's pastimes, they would sing the bhajans of Krishna and the holy name of Krishna for hours on end. And sometimes nowadays, because we haven't got that close association, we forget to actually chant, to actually have kirtan in our homes. Even if you're by yourself, even if you're, even if you're just you and your wife, or just you and your kids and the family, we should maintain bhajan, we should maintain kirtan, because in that chanting of the holy name, you're in a space of meditation, and the sound vibration is coming in, and you feel Krishna's presence. It's not that we miss out on that. It's an absolutely imperative thing to control the mind like that. So when we become the controller of the mind, we control our senses. Things become easier. And in this regard, I wanted to read the pastimes of Pradyumna Mishra from the Chaitanya Charitamrita. I've just been reading that Bhagavad Gita, the Chaitanya Charitamrita, and I just wanted to read a couple of sections which Lord Chaitanya mentions. Bear with me for a tick. So Ramananda Roy instructs Pradyumna Mishra. I'll just read you. It was, here we go. Text 34. When I read this, I thought, wow, this is such an... Every time, if you read another section of either the Bhagavatam or the Chaitanya Charitamrita, it just fills you with positivity. The next day, when Pradyumna Mishra arrived in the presence of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the Lord inquired, "Have you heard talks about Krishna from Sri Ramananda Roy?" Pradyumna Mishra thereupon described the activities of Sri Ramananda Roy. After hearing about these activities, Sri Chaitanya began to speak. "I am a sannyasi," he said, "and I certainly consider myself renounced. But what to speak of seeing a woman? If I even hear the name of a woman, I feel changed in my mind and body. Therefore, who could remain unmoved by the sight of a woman? It is very difficult. Everyone, please hear the topics about Ramananda Roy, although they are so wonderful and uncommon that they should be spoken. The two professional dancing girls are beautiful." So Ramananda Roy used to be an instructor of these dancing girls that used to perform for Lord Jagannath prior to the Rath Yatra. So he was a Sudra. And, this other personality, Pradyumna Mishra, was a top-class Brahmin, and he'd come to Lord Chaitanya to hear about Krishna. And Lord Chaitanya had said, "No, you have to go and see Ramananda Roy if you want to hear about Krishna, really." And so, in a sense, it's like this Brahmin had to go and see the Sudra, because anybody that is in the arts, doing anything in the arts, like dancing, painting, you're classified as the Sudra. So, he had these two professional dancing girls, and they're beautiful and youthful. Yet Sri Ramananda Roy personally massaged their entire bodies. This is an amazing thing. He personally bathed and dressed them and decorated them with ornaments. In this way, he naturally sees and touches the private parts of their bodies. We're talking about 14, 15-year-old girls. Nevertheless, the mind of Sri Ramananda Roy never changes. Fixed. His mind is fixed. Although he teaches the girls how to physically express all the transformations of ecstasy, his mind is as steady as wood or stone. Indeed, it is wonderful that even when he touches such girls, his mind never changes. The authority for such acts is the prerogative of Ramananda Roy alone, for I can understand that his body is not material but has been completely transformed into spiritual ecstasy. He alone and no one else can understand the position of his mind. But I can make a guess in terms of direction from the Shastra. The Vedic scriptures, the Śrīmad Bhāgavatam, gives directions and evidence of this matter. One who hears or describes with great faith the pastimes of Lord Krishna, such as his rasa dance with the gopis, the disease of lusty desires in his heart and agitation caused by the three modes of material nature will immediately nullify and he becomes sober and silent. So Prabhupada also recommended that if, because of the material world and because of what we live in, that we're bombarded by these agitating advertisements and agitated presentations throughout society, if we're agitated sexually, the best thing to do is to read Krishna book, especially the Rasa Leela pastimes, before we go to bed at night time. And then that will ease that lusty desire within us. It will ease and control the mind and steady our senses. Because then we start to realize that actually everything is meant for the Lord's satisfaction, not for our satisfaction. Tasting transcendental, effulgent, sweetly ecstatic love of Krishna, such a person can enjoy life 24 hours a day in transcendental bliss of the sweetness of Krishna's pastimes. Transcendentally, a sober person who with faith and love continually hears from realized souls about the activities of Lord Krishna in his rasa dance with the gopis, or one who describes such activities, can attain full transcendental devotion at the lotus feet of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Thus, lusty material desires, which are the heart disease of all materialistic persons, are for him quickly, completely vanquished. If transcendentally situated persons follow in the footsteps of Rupa Goswami, hears and speaks about the Rasa Leela dance of Krishna, and is always absorbed in thoughts of Krishna while serving the Lord night and a day and night within his mind, what shall I say about the result? It is so spiritually exalted that it cannot be expressed in words. Such a person is externally liberated associate of the Lord, and his body is completely spiritualized. Although he is visible to the material eyes, he is spiritually situated. And all activities are spiritual. By the will of Krishna, such a devotee is understood to possess a spiritual body. So that's our objective, is to be completely absorbed in Krishna. And it starts off from the very first start when we come into the morning, the first day, is to chant our rounds in a very comprehensive way. So getting back to this verse from the text 13 of this chapter, quote, King Indra became successful in breaking the vow of the great sage Kandu, who became attracted by the beauty of the heavenly society girl, Pramlokcha, and begot a female child. This child is described herein as lotus-eyed and very beautiful. Being thus successful in her mission, Pramlokcha returned to the heavenly planets, leaving the newborn child in the care of the trees. Getting back to that. Fortunately, the trees accepted the child and agreed to raise her. From the verse today, it is said, his child was cared for by the trees, and when she grew up, by the order of Lord Brahma, she was delivered to the Prachetas as their wife. So the girl's name was Marisha, as the next verse will explain. It was the predominating deity of the trees that delivered the daughter. So Lord Brahma intervened. They were burning the forests and everything, and so Lord Brahma had to come and say, hey, hang on a tick, let me be put some interceding, some relationships here, rectifying the situation with the Prachetas. And the way he did was to offer this beautiful girl as their wife. And so that pacified them. And even in our Krishna conscious institution, there's sometimes arguments and disputes between people that sometimes needs to be rectified. And so sometimes as a senior devotee, and we're all coming to that point of senior devotees, we sometimes have to take on that role of interceding and being an intervention personality and seeing the best side of both arguments and working out something amicably so that a person's Krishna consciousness can go on. So that's there. And Prabhupada was very much like that. If there was disputes between devotees, he would be the intermediary. He would see both sides of the argument and work it out. Other people, like, say, for example, the Chintarupa with the ladies, and Aniruddha Prabhu and different other devotees have that ability to be able to bring both sides of the party to the table and discuss it and work it out. So that's even in our life. We have to do that. And sometimes in married life also we need, especially again, because of this COVID environment, this COVID-19 pandemic, Sometimes within married life, even now, if you're in very close proximity with your wife, sometimes you need some sort of intermediary to come in and just help you out, which has been the case. I've had to counsel some devotees who are finding it difficult to be in the association of their partner 24/7, so that we have to work out something to keep them apart a little bit. So that's material life. So these are wonderful pastimes in the Śrīmad Bhāgavatam. I'll just finish up by saying, it's just amazing the different topics that the Śrīmad Bhāgavatam and all the Vedic scriptures bring to the fore. And it's beyond our everyday mundane sense perception. It's just, this whole chapter about trees and how the Prachetas were burning the trees, and then they had the deity of the trees and so on. The materialistic scientists would hear this and say, this is complete mythology, this is just phantasmagoria. Who's ever heard of the trees taking over a planet? I mean, really, it's like... But, they are their theories and their their understanding of everything being the source of everything. Material scientists also act on a lot of faith. No matter how much word jugglery or technical jargon that a scientist may say about the creation of the universe and so on and so forth, what they believe ultimately is a belief. It's not necessarily backed up by reality. And so our reading of the sacred texts also requires a level of faith. Some topics may be at times beyond our understanding, and so we, how this universe functions and all the different things, but we take it because the spiritual master, who has clearly instructed us in so many ways, in positive ways, we take it on faith. I may not be able to understand this at the present stage, my spiritual master, but in future I hope to be able to understand that. So we keep an open mind, so we have faith. And they understand that, the functioning of this universe and all the infinite universes, not just this universe, but there's so many different universes. Like just recently on the news, they were saying they were so proud of the fact that they were able to get a satellite close to the sun to be able to take photos of the surface of the sun for the first time. But this is just a speck in the universe. That our sun is but a minor little speck, a little star. And there are billions and trillions of stars everywhere that are just like this. So having faith that there is a cosmic plan to it all, that there is a cosmic plan. There's something you were mentioning the other day in your class, Prabhu, about a cosmic plan. That the Lord is the plan maker. He is the supreme Lord. He is the plan maker. The fact remains that we can experience and have reciprocating, loving relationships with that same supreme Lord individually, personally, by vibrating His holy name. I can't emphasize it enough how important it is to actually chant really, really good rounds, because then you start to experience that connection with that Supreme Lord. The Lord does not let us down. You will feel the Lord within your heart. And in regards to the scientists, your Guru Maharaj, Devamrita Maharaj, says, religion has aspects of science and science has aspects of faith. And it's so true. In our tradition, there's so many different scientific things within our faith tradition, and we have faith, and the science also has an aspect of faith. So the final word for today's class, I thought I'd give a quote from the greatest scientist of the 20th century, Albert Einstein, and he says, quote, "When I read the Bhagavad Gita and reflect about how God creates this universe, everything else seems superfluous." So this is the greatest thinker in the 20th century, practically. Everything else seems superfluous. All this material mundanity, it just fades into insignificance. If we connect with Krishna, that is the highlight of our life. And every day we look forward to connecting closer and closer and closer, closer to Krishna. And it's a reality. Krishna will reveal Himself to you. And when He comes close to you, you know it's a reality. and everything else pales into insignificance. It's all superfluous. Sexual desires, material envy, everything just, who wants it? We're going back home, back to Godhead to be with Krishna. So I'll stop here, Prabhus. Any comments or questions at all? Going to control your mind? Hey,
Sometimes people also marry tree. Sometimes woman first marries tree, then after that marries the man.
I've heard that too. Yeah. There's a society actually, people, environmentalists are called trees. So I suggest people hug a tree every now and again because it's really nice. If you have plants at home, if you have a tree at home, give them a pat. They're living entities. Chant the holy name for them. They will respond. They appreciate it. Thank you very much, Prabhu. Hare Krishna. Bhaktivedanta Śrīmad Bhāgavatam ki jai. Jai Radha Ballabha.